Everyone dreams about living an uncommon life, but how we define that dream is very different for each of us. And for most, it's a lifelong pursuit. Welcome to the Uncommon Life Project podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living that life or enjoying the journey to get there. We're going to also give you some tools, tricks, and tips for starting or accelerating your own efforts to live an uncommon life, a life worth celebrating and savoring. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Dewhurst and Phillip Ramsey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is your host, Phillip Ramsey. You are listening to the Uncommon Life Project, and I'm going to do things a little different today.
It's a special one.
It is. You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. I am Brian Dewhurst.
I feel like we should have some audio and some crowd, maybe like a slow clap in, because why, Brian? Why should we have a slow clap for this one?
Today is the 100th episode.
Which is kind of a big feat. There's a lot of people that start a podcast and don't finish it. I feel like we're just getting started. It's our 100th episode, and we got 1,000 more to give. 100, here we are.
I don't even know what to say. It's a little, when we started this, it was like, okay, we'll try this. And we kind of done a couple seasons, and now it just kind of crept up on me. We're at 100.
I know. It's great. So instead of trying to put words to it, I felt like we would bring in one of my good friends, Ben Fust, to interview us. Ben is a rock star. He helps us make sure our podcasts sound good, so he has everything to blame, although he has a tough job because we might not be the most audio technical, and he tries to make it as good as he can. He also has his own podcast. It's called Live from the Path. It's just him and his friends talking about what God's teaching them, what Jesus is doing in their life, and it's awesome. If you ever could listen to it, I listen to it. It's awesome. So,
and he has a gorgeous voice.
Ben, come on, man.
Here's the deal. Flattery will get you everywhere,
yes.
Brian. But thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, boy, it's been a lot of fun. Just so you guys know, it's been a lot of fun listening to the Uncommon Life podcast. Like one of the benefits I have is that as part of my job, I get to take it all in, right? Like I get to hear about what people are doing and like how they're looking at life differently in ways that I don't know, folks didn't see. And so I don't know. It's been a lot of help to me. So
awesome.
It could be like it could be the grocery store backroom podcast, and maybe I don't get as much from it.
Right.
But
it's
you
been
could.
great.
Probably would.
But I
that's
could.
It's kind of your personality.
Yeah. No, that's true. There is actually Trader Joe's does a podcast. And,
do they?
I see, but that's the thing. It's not quite enough to compel me to go out and do it.
Right.
But I hear about it. I'm like, well, maybe I would listen to it. But I don't ever flip the switch.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, man. This will be great.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you on the other side of the mic, figuratively. Mm-hmm. And we want to hear about what your experiences have been doing 100 podcasts.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start with the, you guys, some of you are numbers guys. Philip's kind of I'm not sure he's a numbers guy.
We know I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy.
All right, but we're going to start with some numbers. So, and this was as of, let's go with like 1 a.m. this morning, okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Total downloads for the Uncommon Life podcast, 49,751.
I didn't even know we had a number on that.
No,
That's amazing.
So you're 250 downloads away from 50,000 clean listens.
Wow.
Now, how does that hit you?
I don't know if we've ever done it for listeners, but we've done it for like hopeful that it triggers something in somebody to then push them off to this uncommon life. 50,000 listeners on our podcast is humbling. I'll start there.
Yeah.
But also, I don't really know what to compare it to because like somebody else might have 100 downloads and have like 500,000.
I think we had a guy on and he had just started his podcast. And I don't know if it was like his 7th episode or he was doing them like daily though or something, like every 3 days. But he already had like 100,000 downloads. And I was like, oh man!
I'll tell you what's demoralizing is you go to Facebook groups with people who are in like podcasting, and the people who talk the most are the guys who really want you to know that they should be talking the most. And so, I've seen a number of guys like that. We're like, hey man, I'm on 3 episodes. I've got 58,000 downloads. Is that good?
Yeah. Right.
Now, I will tell you, though, relatively speaking, based upon the number of downloads you guys get within the first 7 days of most episodes, you're within the top 25% of podcasts that are on the market.
Oh, wow.
Well, there we go.
I feel way better.
I do too. Thanks. That's why Ben's here, folks.
I think it's a point of reflecting. I've definitely been the guy, and the only way I can relate to this, and Phillip knows this, is like, when you make a meal and you're like, everyone's like, oh, that was a great meal, and you're like, I could have used a little more garlic. I'm trying to be at a point in my life where I'm like, no, it was a great meal.
It was all right. Yeah.
So I'm good. I'm good with the number.
So 50,000. And
amazing.
Here's the deal. At at one point, and I don't know if it was a marketing thing, we did get an email that we were like trending on the top podcast for Belgium.
Yeah.
Or something.
That doesn't surprise me.
There's only 3 podcasts coming out of Belgium.
The Belgies, which I think is how it's pronounced, a plural Belgium. They just can't get enough of it. That doesn't surprise me one bit. And so I was thinking about, like, if you got your rough podcast about it, half an hour or so per podcast.
That's right.
And so if we think about close to 50,000 downloads, just so you know, if this doesn't make you a little bit nervous, if you lined all those up, that's you guys talking for 3 straight years. If you take all those listens.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
Which means your voices are like permeating to every corner of the world.
Now that's scary.
For the glory or for the rest of it. That's what's happening. Okay.
Thanks for putting that together.
Yeah, that's no problem. Just something to think about. Is you see a random guy in the street, he's like 3 years. I've been on that guy's mind. It's very possible. He's cranking all the downloads. So let's start talking about. I think it's interesting to look at some of your most listened episodes, like what things are hitting folks. What's interesting about this is that looking at it, a lot of them are close to the same. I think you've got people who they dig on what you're doing. They're open to kind of a broad slice of life, and so all this stuff is interesting to them. And so I wouldn't say there's slam dunks in here. However, I think as we look at the top 5, here we go. Number 1. Well, actually, let's go from number 5. Let's build the suspense.
Back it up.
Number 5, episode 38. Facing challenges and building your dreams with Ian and Christina Nelson Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Great podcast.
So, actually, maybe I'm going to make my way up to the first 4. So, I want you to tell me if you think there's any themes here, like anything that connects to, okay?
Okay.
So, episode 11, Caleb Walsh and What's Behind 500 Doors.
Yeah.
Next level up, okay? Number 3, the inaugural Why We're Podcasting episode.
Okay.
The first one ever.
Yeah, and that hit number 3.
Which is good. It means like people are going back and listening to
That was Phillip's idea. I got to give you credit on that.
Yeah. Or because it's one of the top ones, it could also indicate that they listened to that one and then did not listen to anyone in the future because they're like,
Yeah, that's valid. That's a valid point right there, Ben.
Something to consider.
Something to think through. Yeah.
All right.
We'll edit that one out.
Episode 6. Uncommon Banking, the truth and beauty of cash value life insurance.
Okay.
Is that number 1?
That's number 2.
Okay.
Number 2.
I've actually listened to that one recently. I was
Really?
making my way through some of the back catalog. And took it in.
What did you think?
It's super interesting, actually,
Okay.
and it made me. And I started hunting, pecking around for stuff to learn more.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting because just quickly, that's the reason why we're still here today is that we understood that strategy really well.
Yeah.
And we weren't telling people like, this is for you. We were just saying, hey, here's a strategy you might not have heard about.
Yeah.
And produced some value there. And people are like, okay, maybe you're decent at what you're doing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the premise of kind of be your own bank, it's a grabber because you're like, I've met myself. There's no way I'm my own bank.
Right.
And so, but watching it play out and like at the end of the episode, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Not only does this not like this isn't, I don't know how else to put this. It's not scamming. Like it's just a right way to use tools in front of you.
Right.
Right.
And I think, as time has progressed, the banks have become a bigger antagonist. So it's like, people's animosity to what's going on, I think is kind of,
Good point.
grown over time. So.
Yep. Agreed.
And number 1.
Number
drum roll.
1. Episode 2, the 7 sources of
Residual income.
So basically, a lot of people are dropping.
Maybe they'll get to 1, 2,
3, 4, and
out.
then
Now,
sayonara.
in the defense of every episode henceforth,
Right.
They haven't been on the blocks as much.
Right.
Right? Like they've been on the books for quite a bit longer, so people
Right.
have a chance to go through and picking them up. And I would say that actually I was starting to look at some of the ones like even 2020, 2021. But I do think thematically it's around some of these core things. I think what I see in your podcast numbers is people are trying to get a sense for I want a different way to look at the world. Like I'm trying my best and people start to recognize that they're limited by their experiences, by the things that they've seen out there, and they're like, I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. And I think what's interesting about what you guys do is that they are missing something, but it's not like something like wild under a rock somewhere. It's something that can be easily connected to, that you can recognize that this is an extension of something that they've already had on their mind. They couldn't articulate it. Maybe they haven't seen it. I think those are the themes and the things what people are looking for.
Right. People want a paradigm shift.
Yes.
Especially with money. Because money is like, there's either shame or frustration or whatever they're feeling.
Yeah.
And just sometimes come to us as just like, I just need a different perspective on how I'm viewing my current situation.
Yep.
And I think money is fluid, and so a lot of these concepts or things, I think people have been percolating on them, or they do their own research on Google. But the step to actually implement them is the hard part, right?
Oh, yeah.
And especially if you have a spouse or, you have different risk tolerances. Phillip does a great job of, talking about people's risk tolerance and maybe your wife is wired one way or your husband's wired the other. And so how do you marry all that together and actually make decisions and make stuff happen? So,
Yep. I think there is a disconnect between what people can start to believe is possible and then recognizing that they can be part of the possibility. And I think that is, you've got a couple of burdens there on expanding and you can create opportunity and hope in folks, but if they don't believe that they can see themselves in it, and a lot of times you can't manufacture that in yourself. As hard as you try, there's always this sense of, and it doesn't even have to be like debilitating doubt. It's just like, I just don't know if it's me because I didn't think of it, and I'm not sure what the path looks like, and could I screw it up? Those are kind of the things that sit on people's minds,
Right.
Okay, so that's how people are reacting to your podcast. Let's talk from your perspective. Maybe top 2 episodes that you've shot that you've been part of.
Yeah, I know mine.
Okay, let's have it.
Although Ian and Christine and Nelson Johnson, when you said that, I was like, oh, that was a really good one. My 2 that I would say before that, I would say that Jesse Cole with the Savannah Bananas was my man. Poor Brian.
I didn't get to see the yellow suit.
Yeah, I came up, and usually we do this without video. But at first, we were doing it on Zoom at that time.
Yeah.
And he comes in hot with a yellow tuxedo on, with a top hat.
Like Curious George, like the man in the yellow hat. Like, that's what we're talking about.
Right. And he was like, wait, this isn't a video? And I was like, no. And I was like, I hope you didn't get dressed up for that. And he's like, oh, no, this is my outfit every day.
I had it on anyway.
Yeah, right. So, but it was such a dynamic interview and podcast. And I think chances are he does a lot. I know that. Jesse Cole does a lot of podcasts. And at the end, he probably is just flattering us and he does this all the time. But he was like, hey, that was actually really enjoyable. Because we went down of like, okay, what's your wife thinking at this point? When you're selling the house and you're going to go buy an old rickety stadium, how do you do it? So for me, Jesse Cole was one of my favorites. I have another one, but I'll let you go next.
No, he's actually on my list too. And the thing I would add is, if they're going to make a movie about any one of the guests on our podcast, I think that one is the top of the list. Like just an American story, buying a baseball team with your wife, like selling everything you have, basically like sleeping on a mattress in a van or something. It's just, and he's great at telling his story, but it was such an authentic American, like, the American dream story.
Yep.
And so the other thing I'd say about that podcast, I think I had 3 or 4 full pages of notes. The business and just life wisdom and the principles that he shared in that podcast, I was just blown away. So yeah, that was definitely.
I would also say too,
2.
for Jesse, he had a different paradigm that he viewed the world.
Yeah.
For example, he was like, "Hey, when you go to a baseball field, what's your number one thing when you're taking your family of 5? Price." Sure was.
It's the 42 times you open your wallet to get through the game.
And so he recognized that and said, okay, so what we do is an all-inclusive deal. Like you get the ticket, you get the whole concessions for free. Not for free, but we price it all in.
Right.
And so like he was forward thinking enough to try to set himself in the other people's shoes, which is brilliant. But then also too, just like we entertain. Like that's really why you go to a baseball field, is just to entertain. And like, so for me, there was just like so many like, holy cow.
Right.
You're taking me to the woodshed in a good way. So
yeah, my wife and I are still talking about how to fit in a Savannah Bananas game to our
I
travel
do
schedule.
believe, and we might have this on record, that you are offered to throw the first banana at the game. I think that he said that.
Well, and I think I promised that I would get them to the Field of Dreams here in Iowa.
Yeah, probably
And so
that
I
too.
feel like I have some work to do.
Yeah,
So,
probably do.
Oh yeah,
That was a reminder.
you're a few steps in on that, or
I just remembered that, so
okay.
it's a good thing we're doing this.
All right, my second is Brett Gilliland, and he was awesome. Like this was a fun interview. Poor Brian could barely get a question in because I was like leaning in, and just the way that he would help business owners really start looking at their business in a way that here's the most important thing. This is how you take it to the next level. I loved it. It was just a really interesting interview that took me off guard. And by the end of it, we're talking about leadership.
Yeah.
And so it was a fun one for me, but
yeah. Well, so it's the theme so far, and kind of what you guys are saying. Like some of the podcasts that stick out to you are the ones that contain surprises. Like were places where, like, especially with as varied as stuff that you guys get into, like there's things that would surprise me that maybe you wouldn't blush at.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the thing with Jesse Cole and Brett, like when we first started the podcast, it was like, we're reaching out to people we know.
Yeah.
And then we started getting referrals to people like, oh, you should have this person on the show. So like Jesse, we had no idea who he was, so I came in totally cold of like,
Oh, no kidding.
and a little bit behind the curtain, like I really don't prepare for the podcast at all. Like I try to just channel the Holy Spirit and like, let's just, just be in the moment and let happen what happened. And it just blew my socks with that whole podcast. And so that's kind of been the fun part too. It was, like when you hear like a big movie's coming out and then you're like, I did that. Phillip and I just had this with the Batman.
Yeah.
And I was like, I heard it wasn't that good. And he's like, dude, you're crazy. It was amazing. So, but when you hear that, like, oh wait, it kind of taints it. So I try to just come in like not have any preconceived notions and just let's see what happens. And so anyways.
All right. Oh, now, so you had a number 2 yet.
Yeah, I had a number 2. The other one for me actually was Jody Steinhauer, which was kind of random because we got referred to her as well and had no idea what she was doing. And she's a Canadian businesswoman and just was a boss. But the main thing that she had done was weaving in kind of charity and giving back to community through her businesses. And I have a real vision for that. We haven't gotten to that point yet with Uncommon Wealth. I'm hoping to get there soon. So that kind of really hit a nerve with me of kind of some things that have been on my mind for a long time, but I haven't got to scratch that itch yet.
Yep.
And so it was just a really amazing story and the amount of people that she's touching. And then she coaches businesses on how to integrate their passions and charities to So her reach and kind of the ripple effect of her life and what she's teaching and living is really profound. So.
I agree with that. And here's the thing. At the end of the day, with all of our guests, there's always one time or one spot where I'm like, oh, I needed to hear that.
Yeah, for sure.
Brian too. And so it's not like we know everything. Mainly I'm the one who kind of like coordinates who's going to be on. And there's even times where like, I don't know him very well. So like, hey, let's have a quick pre-interview.
Yeah.
And then Brian doesn't, which I appreciate because then he can listen to it for the first time.
Yeah.
He can be like, well, tell us that story. And I kind of been like, well, we just talked about that yesterday. Well, the listeners didn't hear that. So, but there's always one time in the episode that we're interviewing. I'm like, wow, like that's really good.
That was for me.
Yeah. A little bit.
Totally.
That's awesome. Actually, that was one of the things I was going to ask is that, like thinking even of your top 2 episodes, can you think of things that like changed about not just what you heard, but like anything about your business that you've said, look, I want to look at that. I want to change something based upon what I heard. But it sounds like, it's more of a universal experience. You're picking up morsels, all over the place.
Every time we do a podcast.
I think the one thing that I've learned, I talked about this on one of the podcasts recently, but I'm going to hit it again because I think it's important. And I think especially in America, we have this, like, I don't know if it's pressure or expectation that you just got to work all the time. Like you've got to constantly be employed or like doing something.
Right.
And the theme that I've seen from a lot of our guests is that they had actually a period where they weren't working and had that downtime to like really focus, recalibrate of like, what am I doing and where's my life going?
Yeah.
And that pause is really powerful. Phillip had a pause in his career that I think was powerful. And so that theme, but it's been interesting as we meet with clients or entrepreneurs, they're scared of that pause. And it's like, no, like, you should actually embrace that gap and like step into it so that you really know what you're going to do next is really aligned and focused. And so that's kind of one of the themes I've gotten out of, the first 100 episodes.
Yeah. It's odd to look at a pause as an action, like as an intentional space, as opposed to something that like it's that you've been burdened with, but really it's something that says like I'm intentionally doing that so I can see this thing clearly.
Yeah.
Right on. So for having done at episode 100, that's a lot of episodes under your belt, and so
yes, there is.
There's a generic what have you learned, but let's go maybe a little bit down one and say what were things that you started out of the gate doing, and then through time you're like, I think we should probably stop that.
Or feedback that we're told to stop.
Yeah, right.
That.
Hey, you should knock that off.
Yeah. All right. I know where mine is. We used to name the person that does the intro.
The lady voice.
Yeah, we used to name her every time it was a different name. Anyway, there was like people who were like, I don't know, just stop that. So I was like, dang it. It was like my favorite thing. Like, what name are we going to call her today?
So Katrina, just shout out for you.
Right. Or whoever it was. We never met her.
I was going to ask, it's one of my questions. Like, did we land on something? Did we land on like the consensus she's most definitely a Stacy or something?
No,
it didn't. Okay.
I think kind
Deborah.
of like Katrina. Yeah.
Okay, it's a point of contention. This is why this had to go.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I think for me was you could really tell when an episode was really good
Yeah.
and when an episode was like, oh, that didn't go well.
Yeah.
And it took a little bit to get there, but and we've had to reshoot several podcasts, either from a technical error,
Mainly
or,
that reason.
But yeah, and so yeah, you kind of get a feel real quick, like within the first 5-10 minutes of a podcast, of like, oh, this is good, we gotta keep going, and then or like, ooh, this is rough.
Yeah.
But
Sometimes Brian and I will usually always be in studio together.
Yeah.
And then sometimes like our guests are across the country. And so Brian and I can lock eyes when we feel like this isn't going as well as we thought we are. So look at each other like, what are we going to do now? Like, oh boy. And it was interesting. The person that kind of told us to start with podcasting, he's like, hey, there's always this like card you can play.
Yeah.
The trump card, which is like, hey, I don't know what happened, but the audio just seemed really bad for some reason on that. So, but we've never done that. We've always just said, you know what? Like there's still content in there that I think is valuable.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say, if you ever tell somebody that, you got to tell me. That way I don't go to that guy and say, hey, look, I do podcast work. Oh, you're the audio guy for Uncommon Life,
right,
huh?
Right. Don't do that.
So looking back at all the different folks you've had on the show, and based upon what we've talked about already, this may be like all of them, but like anybody that's like burning in your bones, you're like, boy, I'd love to have this person back on and see how things are going.
So good. All right, this is a true behind the veil here. We thought about maybe even going, because I would say every person that we have on the show is still on this path of the uncommon life. Mm-hmm. And so to get an update from them, I think would be super powerful to like, okay, 3 years ago you were here, and now where are you here now? And like, what's changed? And so we've even talked about, do we go back to all the people and try to re-interview them and kind of like do a better job of prepping and listening to the episode and being like, all right, here's a couple things that you said. Where are you now? And kind of give a snapshot of like a before and after, if you will.
Yeah.
But I would say any guest that we've had on the show, I'd say like I would love to get them back on the show because I have questions of where they're at now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think obviously the life journey and being an entrepreneur and following your passion, it evolves and you hit different stages of life. And I think there's wisdom in communicating or hearing from entrepreneurs as they, encounter those different stages, I'm going to be more specific since Phillip went generic, and I'm going to say Gabe Glenn. Gabe is a, super entrepreneur. He's actually here in town, so this one would be easy to have back on. But I think Gabe and what he was doing when he first kind of like we knew Gabe before he started Make You Save.
Right.
And so like we kind of saw that whole formulation of the idea. Like he took the break that I kind of talked about previously. He took a year off or a year and a half. He did a podcast. He got to interview Jeff Immelt, who's the former CEO of General Electric, and had a really cool podcast, tapped into his roots of actually his dad was a manufacturing plant manager.
Yeah.
And anyways, that kind of pause and that break and kind of pushing into the podcast and, his dad's roots. And that was the genesis of the idea for the business. And so we kind of got to see that, come to life. And he's such a great guy, great entrepreneur. And, I said early on, I worked in consulting. And so I worked on $1 billion companies. And I was like, early on, I was like, this is $1 billion deal.
Yeah.
And he's well on his way to getting there. And so I think for me, just seeing that from kind of the pause to conception to launch and everything they're doing now would be a fun one to have back on.
I like that because I think if you think about the life of an entrepreneur, like you don't ever stop. You're not stop being an entrepreneur. And if one of the gaps that people have is maybe not always a fear, but like there is an unknown in front of you, and they're like, hey, even if this is successful now, I'm going to be 50, I'm going to be 60. What does that look like?
Right.
And like it's such a varied answer. It could look like a lot of things, but there's also kind of a pattern to it.
Yeah.
With it, you can learn or at least take comfort that it's shaped out as people kind of made their way through it. And so I think that is an inspiring in and of itself to show that it does progress and it doesn't stop, but it does mature, and you can look at it and not have to be so trepidatious over what 10 years from now may be.
For sure.
And you know what? That's funny because just quickly, both Brian and I, when we were thinking about this 100th episode, we both said Gabe Glenn was the person that was going to have the most impact to people
Yeah.
in his life. So that's kind of cool. Just kind of a quick
Yeah, that is pretty cool. So let's talk about those who have yet to be. So you've reached out to folks. You've got people to come on. Who would you like to interview that you haven't gotten to yet?
Yeah. So for the 100th episode, I did want to try to get Bob Goff on the show. And Bob Goff to me is a guy, he's a writer. If you have read any of his books, you understand like the paradigm shift that he kind of operates in is like lifelong. It's like you're going to the grocery store, there's like a life lesson to be had.
Yep.
So I just love the way that he perceives the world, and I think he'd be really fun to interview. And honestly, even better than Bob Goff, I'd like to talk to his wife.
No doubt.
To see like how does he do it and how do you support him in such a high capacity? Like I'm always trying to help people. I'm trying to change the world. Like how in the world? So maybe even better, Bob Goff's wife.
Mrs. Goff. Actually, so on our radio show, that Bob Goff had come up. I want to say within the last year or so, and we had that exact conversation. Is like he lets someone use his boat and do this, and it feels like it's just an open door to being what you may perceive as being put out, and he's like, no, I want to put it on, go for it. And you just know Mrs. Goff has got to have some thoughts.
Sweet Maria.
That's right.
She's got some thoughts. Yep. Love it.
Yeah. Well, you reached out to him for our book because you were like, I want to put my phone number in the book because he puts his phone number in the book, right?
Yeah. It was kind of like those desperate times call for desperate measures. And I was like, my question to Bob is it seems like he has ample number of time. Like you and I have 24 hours in the day. Right. Feels like he has at least 54.
Yeah.
So
how are you doing all
how
this?
are you doing that? So I ended up like basically calling him. I got a book out and I looked at his phone number and I called him and, I ended up having a conversation with him. So it's real. His phone number works.
Awesome.
And one of the questions I had at the end of his, our conversation, I was like, should I put my number in the book? He's like, yeah, like, well, you can always change it. Of course you'd say that. Like, yeah. Anyway.
I mean, this is coming from the guy who's doing the Gregorian plus calendar, who's got the extra hours. So.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, how about you?
I'm split. I think Coach K, so Mike Krzyzewski's coach, and right now they won last night, so we're in the middle of the March Madness, and they won. I've been a huge Duke fan my entire life. I mean, he's basically the winningest coach in college basketball. I just think the wisdom.
What would be the question? Your first question for Coach K?
I don't know. It'd probably just be like, "Can I have your autograph?"
Oh,
he's
gosh.
like something lame,
Or like, why did you agree to this?
But
We only have 50,000 downloads.
And then if you hear the story about how he they took a real chance on him. He was a young dude coaching at the time, and and just he's been there ever since. Now he is the program. He's iconic, and just the other side of it too. I think a lot of it, and they talk about it in the program, is he was really like the father to a lot of these guys. That not so much like they came from a bad home or anything, but just being away from home and spending so much time with him, and so just kind of the wisdom and life principles on top of the basketball and how you build teams and how you get people to peak at the right time. I mean, I'm just in awe of his career and his wisdom. So
yeah, there's a lot to balance and manage and figuring out where to push, where to encourage. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, again, it's not a non-entrepreneurial conversation. Like that same kind of thing is in there. Right. And I think I was thinking about even some of the folks you've had on, and then just talking about Bob Goff. There was just something so interesting to me about people who seem to take in the world differently, but like without effort. Like something where you would hear them speak and you go, yes, I want to take it in that way, and then I have to try, and I fail and I succeed, and I fail and I succeed, and then like there they are over there with putting no effort into it, like just how it comes in.
Right.
Like it's just so fascinating.
That's a great point.
Yeah, they're just sailing along, and the wind's behind them.
That's right.
Yeah,
and it's kind of okay. Maybe this is obscure. There was a Hugh Grant, Sandra Bullock movie called 2 Weeks Notice. Anybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so. Long story short, he becomes very dependent on her as a lawyer. She's just supposed to be his lawyer, and she just starts ending up in all his day-to-day decisions. And there's a point where she gets frustrated, and he goes, "Look, I just have to know what you think." And that came to me when I was. I actually think it was after listening to somebody you had on, and I'm like, I just would want to know. Like, I'd feel like I can't even make any decisions. Can you just tell me what you think about this? Because like you just you take it in so differently,
good. Right? So good.
So speaking of podcasts that like we talked about ones where like, hey, slam dunk, I want to talk to this person again. Hey, I think these are the top ones for me. Are there any that you did where you thought, I'm not sure if this is going to be a tickler?
Yeah.
But it turned out where you're like, I'm totally surprised. I loved this.
Oh, that you loved it. Okay,
Yeah.
so like a sleeper.
Yeah.
A sleeper one.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I got that. Rick Cordero for me. We were talking about disability insurance, like individual disability insurance. Like, okay, what? He was awesome.
He was.
Like, I was like engaged and we were laughing. And like, if you know Rick Cordero, I know him personally. Like that totally makes sense. But when you talk about something as dry as disability insurance,
Right.
you would never think. And I'm telling you what, he did so good. It was a good one for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a different answer.
Because you already mentioned the other one.
Because
that
I
you were
already
thinking?
mentioned the other one, but I mean, for me, it was that Jody Steinauer one. I mean, just was like, what is this going to be about? And I didn't have a lot of color, but she just blew me away. So that would have been one, and then I can't think of her name. She's here in Des Moines with the dessert business, and then now she leads the entrepreneurial
Creme.
Creme. Her story, I was about in tears with her podcast, and knowing a little bit about her and her story ahead of the podcast, just because she's from Des Moines. But yeah, it was just like super powerful in the adversity she overcame, and So there's been several moments within the podcast where you're just like, holy cow, so
It's good.
I think it's interesting if you were to look at the titles, and maybe I'm particular attentive to this because I'm looking at the titles, but like if you were just flying by, there's a number of things where you could go, that's going to be dry. Mm-hmm. Hey, who's the process guy? The process guy was awesome. It was a great interview.
Josh Dunwoody.
Yes,
yes,
right. And you're like, oh god, the guy talking about process, the guy talking about disability insurance. Like these are things where they feel like they're going to be dry, but the reality is they're topics, and underneath those topics are humans, and then things that attach to humans. We care about processes because humans are doing them.
Right.
We care about disability insurance because not only are people buying and selling it and engaging with it, but like that's hitting your grandparents, it's hitting your parents, and so like. If we can get past what feels dry because it feels unfamiliar, what you find is that like there's all kinds of gray and deep and awesome and all kinds of things that people are doing that would surprise you.
Right.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, I feel like we could have anybody on the show and everyone has an uncommon life. Like we can just highlight because everybody has like their own little thing, and like you just need to be encouraged. Like no, your life is your life and it's uncommon and you're valuable.
Yeah. We did an event with Josh Dunwoody and I hadn't seen him in that context, and I should have known that he would be great because he's in the military, he's leading guys. I mean, he's a dynamic guy. He blew it out. I mean, it was amazing. So I echo you that on Josh.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna take the slide whistle the other direction. Okay. Yes. Can you talk to me about a podcast where you came, you saw, and you barely made it through? Like it just felt like you weren't in it.
You ready for this? I got one that's going to knock your socks off.
Go ahead.
The biggest name that we've ever had on our podcast.
Probably the guy with the most followers.
For sure.
Social.
Yep. Jordan Harbinger. Is that her name?
Harbinger, yeah. So 6 million downloads a month, Jordan Harbinger.
Like major dude.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm out. I'm out. Man, it was like, it was just so methodical. Now, here's the difference. Jesse Cole probably has done more podcasts than our boy Jordan.
Yeah.
Come at me, bro. But Jesse made it exciting and fun. And Jordan was just like, what are we talking about? Like, it just wasn't my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he's not a great guy. I'm just saying like, he doesn't know us from a hill of beans. And you could tell like this entitlement of
it felt that way.
It felt that way.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I'm not grateful that we interviewed him. I'm just saying like I came and I saw and I'm just like.
Now, how did that come about?
Yeah, that was from an introduction.
Oh,
and
okay.
Then to get him on the show, I think he even has, it's kind of a cool thing. He was like, hey, will you donate to some of my charities that I want you to donate to? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So he did and got like a half an hour interview with them. But I felt like he was promoting a movie and he was making his rounds.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yep.
And nothing against him, but I felt like there could have been a more excited energy level of like, no, tell me what you guys are doing. Like,
yeah, right.
But it was just like, I'll answer the questions and we'll move on. And so,
yeah, that's fair. Brian, how about you?
Evan Jackson, who I love, and he's here in Des Moines, and we've actually referred clients to him, and they have like are raving fans of his. So it was nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
I was just it was just a bad off day, and I was struggling to mask that and just engage. And
his voice is amazing.
He does have an
So
amazing
I was
voice,
really
too.
like, I was in it. So it sometimes like, and I would say even the Jordan Harbinger, like Brian was more into it than I was.
Yeah.
So it worked.
Yeah. So let's talk about. So actually, he's come up before. So like, guests that you think have the greatest potential. I heard Gabe.
Gabe
I heard
Glenn.
Gabe Glenn.
Gabe Glenn. Make you safe for sure.
Still good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say
You
that.
got to talk to him. You got to bring him back in here.
We could, and he would love it. And he's
Don't
super
call him
engaging.
now. It's rude, but just maybe
Okay.
later.
Okay. I'll do it.
Okay.
We'll do it. I love that guy. He's great.
Okay. So we've talked about a lot of individuals. Do you got a favorite twofer? Favorite couple that
yes.
you've had on the show?
Any couple that we have on the show, I'm in. I love it. I love the dynamics. I love to see like the nonverbals, and then you can see it right away. No, you can ask them right away of like, in this particular moment, what was your wife's perspective? And then you can just ask them, and then
Yeah.
they can just tell you like, I was in a bad place, or
Yeah, right.
or like I was totally all in, whatever. So mine are Ian and Christina Nelson Johnson was amazing, and I just love their story. I also love John and Hannah Shiplett. Like they're basically like, what's the
Chip and Joanna.
Chip and Joanna Gaines for the Des Moines, doing amazing things. But just they were funny and lighthearted, and you can really tell the people who have good marriages. You could tell it in Ian and Christina Nelson Johnson. You can tell it in the Shiplets. And honestly, everybody that we have on the show usually has a really good marriage. And
Yeah.
so those would be my two if I couldn't pick. There's anybody, though, with guests or with spouses I'm in.
I had Matt and Haley Phillips. Haley actually works
That's a great one.
for us, works with us, whatever. She kind of is like our center fielder. We ask her to do quite a bit, and she does it with grace and tenacity, and she's just an amazing teammate. So, but their story, they essentially had a miscarriage, and it cost a ton of money to just, deal with that. And so they ended up turning, I love kind of the mess into your message type thing. And they kind of started their own nonprofit to help, basically provide scholarships or financial aid to families going through, that lost a baby.
Yeah.
And so they just do a ton for us, for other people, and she just runs a tight ship. And so I just...
Yeah, that's a good one. It's called the Fletcher Foundation.
Yeah.
It's powerful. And the story that they have behind that is so neat. And then they just want to help financially for people who are like getting a bill after they never brought their baby home, which is really a cool niche. And
happens like way more than you think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's good.
Yeah, that's so interesting on places where that people will find to step in where no one else would think to step in.
Right.
Right. Like there's big ticket things, and churches are generally pretty good at this. Hey, we'll bring the meal and we'll follow up and we'll take care of some things. But like there's always those things that are in the corner that would be personal to you anyway, and then like are ultra personal to you.
Right.
And no one would ever know. And you wouldn't bring it up either. And so to see someone kind of be able to be with you in that space, it's super powerful. Super powerful.
Right. It's a good one.
Okay, so someone comes up to you on the street and they
Yes.
say, "Hey, I like the vest, and
That's right.
I see you just left Nordicers, and oh, by the way, you look like some fellows who run a podcast."
Uh-huh.
And you say, "Yeah, I do. You should check out."
Oh.
What?
Oh.
Which show would you point him to?
Okay, I'll let Brian answer that, but here's what I would say: the most podcasts that I reference the most,
Yeah.
in like just the day-to-day
Analogy
conversation,
or wisdom.
Yeah.
For me, it's Nadine Hawbaker. She's 70, I don't know, 74.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but she's a little bit
She's a
older,
golden girl.
and she's amazing. And what I love about it is the mindset that she had, because she's an artist. She does watercolor. She's an amazing artist. And one time in the interview, I ended up going to her house, by the way. The dog was like licking my feet as we were interviewing. Brian was not there, but he was piped in. And I asked her, I was like, how do you get paid to paint?
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, Phillip, like I don't get, like I don't know. I just love to paint. People keep paying me." Like that mindset is what I'm trying to, and what Brian is trying to do is instill in our clients.
I love it.
Do what you love to do and watch the money then follow you.
Yeah.
And that was her thing. She's like, "I don't know how they just do it. I just keep loving to paint. Like even if they didn't pay me, I'd still paint." And I love that. And that's probably probably the one I reference the most of like, this is the mindset that I think we all should be seeking after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be mine.
Yeah. I think Jesse Cole is a big one. I think one that we use like tangibly or tactically is Scott Shatford, who is the president of AirDNA. They run data analytics on the Airbnb and short-term rental market. That one, I think we send a lot. We have a lot of people that are interested in or looking at or invested in Airbnbs, and it's kind of a really cool story of like an actual tool that you can use, but also like how he founded that company. And
Right.
So, and then Caleb Walsh with the 500 doors. We use that one a lot with clients too. Of what's your risk tolerance? Of this is a guy who wanted to go get 500 doors or rental units in a year, and he did it.
Yeah.
And he beat the door down. And it's just kind of like, what are you willing to give?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's good.
And one of the things, just so you guys don't undersell this part of it, I find that a lot of the duocasts where you guys are in here talking about on basically how do I take in what's going on around me, because I think even as people are latched on to be inspired by what they're seeing other people do, it does feel like anything could come out of left field and tip you over if it doesn't feel stable. And like when you don't know what you don't know, inflation can feel that way.
Right.
The disruption in monetary policy can feel that way. And so I do think those are great great shows to point people back to, just to help fill out an orientation of what the world is doing.
right.
That's good. That's good.
All right. So how we doing here? I think we're getting pretty near.
This is your show.
Okay. All right. So here's what I'm gonna do. I think we're
I've
gonna
just
do.
been enjoying this. This is
I know.
great.
It's great.
So maybe I got a few more.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna go through a few more, and I think we're gonna cut,
We're gonna land the plane.
and then there may be some bonus questions.
Okay.
Okay, now for a free podcast, I'm not sure what the tease is here, but it does feel like we're doing something.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's see what we can do to land this plane. So actually, I'm kind of curious. Do you guys go back and do you listen to your own shows?
Great question.
Oh, that's a funny one.
Used to at the first, and I used to get on Brian because he never did.
Dude, he would yell at me, like
Truly.
yell at me
Like,
in the car.
dude.
You haven't listened to this episode. I'm like, dude, I can't do it anymore.
Well, we also weren't very good when we started.
Yeah.
So I felt like it was like a football player reviewing the tapes of what you could have done better.
Yeah.
That was really what I was trying to instill in poor Brian.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we need to at this point. I'm not saying we're good by any stretch. But
Well, and I think like to Philip's credit, like, there is a technical aspect of the podcast of like just the intros, the outros, the bios. Like there is a science to this thing. And so I definitely think in that regard, like Philip's been a great steward. It's primarily been his, thing to lead.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like early on, I was like, oh my gosh, like is anyone going to listen to this? I sound horrible. Like I can't listen to this,
Yep.
So it was more of probably a lack of confidence in myself than it was anything else. But, we're busy. And so it just really became like, it's just hard to
Yeah.
listen to all these and then also trying to take in other people's content. And
Yeah.
so anyways, no, we
No,
don't. listen to
not
them.
really so much.
No. But I will say that what Brian does to contribute to the podcast, because he does, obviously, you hear it, is like he does a really good job on, hey, should we talk about in our duo cast?
Yeah.
Like that's mainly Brian's kind of like, hey, this would be good. There's a couple times like the one about COVID, and I was like, get on the microphone. And that was like the first time I was like, I went off because it was just interesting. It was at the beginning of COVID.
Yep.
You can go back and listen to it, I guess. But basically I was like trying to instill like, this is a great opportunity to pour into your family. Like,
Yeah.
this is what
absolutely.
you do next. Anyway, so but that's usually Brian's deal. Is like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. We just did one on market inflation and where the market's at. I didn't talk too much, and I was like, hey, brother, I can't really help you, but he did awesome as he
You
always
do a
does.
good job
so.
leading and directing and yeah.
Well, I think that actually pairs really well because I think you have an opportunity to ask the types of questions that like maybe we're wondering, but you don't want to, you
Yeah.
can put it into voice,
Right.
and say, look, this could be out of left field, but is this relevant?
Right.
and then Brian can sort it out.
Right.
So, have you ever had a situation where someone has mentioned something about a podcast episode to you where you thought, I better go check that out? I don't remember saying that or anything like that.
We had one of those.
I don't know if I've ever had that, but it's interesting. People were like, oh, I just listened to this and we've never met with them. Or like, we've heard all your podcasts and they start referencing something we've talked about. And
Yep.
they like,
Yeah.
seems like they know us.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely brought down I don't want to say a barrier, but just like there's a natural like, oh, I've heard you talk. Like you were saying, like 3 years at a time, whatever. But
Yep.
yeah, there's just this level of familiarity from their side, like, no, I'm
Yep.
just meeting you for the first time, but
Yeah.
so it's been kind of fun.
Because people can call us and do like the 15-minute consultation, and it's always crazy when I'm like, "Hey, this is Phillip," like, and they kind of get quiet, like, "No, like the Phillip," like, yeah, we don't really have a big shop here, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how what feels like getting together and talking about either interviewing other people or talking about your business, like how much of you actually comes out in that. And so people do get to meet you in ways that are surprising. You're like, I don't remember telling that story, or like they get niches of your personality that you feel like would take, a few dinners and some bowling to get to. But like they've just been creeping on you over the airwaves, and like they can be closer to you than you
I
realize.
do love to go bowling though. So
I do
I'm open
not.
to that.
You'll meet Brian there.
You don't like? Okay, we'll pick this up
No,
later.
yeah, we will.
I'm disappointed in that.
No, I'm horrible.
Well, I didn't say you had to be good at it.
No, yeah, okay.
Okay. And so, like, do you have any podcasts that you listen to either for inspiration or you just like them? You think they're super well done? Like, because a lot of people
like
will listen to this
outside,
podcast and go like, what else should I be taking in? So, do you listen to any?
Yeah, I listen to yours. No, and this is a shameless plug, but like it is so quirky. It's just you and your friends. You don't care who's listening, who isn't.
I do not.
It's great. And you've been doing it for how long?
I'll be 11 years this year.
Okay,
Wow.
11 years, you guys.
Yeah.
And like it's truly good friends, and it's like you're on the outside or like a corner of the room. And like honestly, there's not a lot of like things that they're really talking about, but you can't stop listening. It's just like I just want to hear everyone. And you have a twin brother.
I do.
And I have no idea what they sound like differently. And so I'm always like, it's either Ben or it's Mike.
That's right.
But it's great. So I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but yours are one of them that I like. Every time I start it, I listen to it and I just laugh, and it's just a good time.
That justifies the 3 downloads a week. Now I know where they're coming from. I listen to the other 2.
I go in spurts, so I'll kind of hit them hard, and then I take a couple months off. So I do like Pomp's podcast, Anthony Pompliano. I like Pomp's stuff. I kind of hit that once in a while. I pick up a little bit of Rogan. I can't do the whole thing, but
Right.
and then I've really kind of there's a guy who I actually is going to list in terms of people I want to interview. His name is Robert Breedlove, and he talks a lot about Bitcoin. So I do quite a bit of Bitcoin cryptocurrency research, and Robert Breedlove is like kind of like a philosopher type.
Yeah.
Like you don't hear people talk like that anymore,
Right.
But like you kind of have to like listen or play it back like what did he just say? And it was like one of the most profound things I've heard.
Yeah.
So I kind of take in a lot of his stuff, and then Michael Saylor does a lot of other people's podcasts. He's been a real champion of the Bitcoin community. So that's kind of where a lot of my content comes from.
Awesome. So, and this is perhaps a bit cheesy, but I think we're gonna end with this one. So
Okay.
you're Phillip and Bryan, and you're working on your 100th podcast right now, and you run into the Bill and Ted, Phillip and Bryan from
Going
100
backwards.
episodes
We're going
ago.
backwards, yep.
That's right. What encouragement or advice do you give them as they're starting on the podcasting journey?
Right. You got to keep feeding the beast. Like once you start this train of content producing, there's really no stopping. So get in a cadence. Don't be hard on yourself. Get people that you know have a story to say, and then help them unlock that story. That would be probably what I would say. Hey, don't get discouraged. It's going to be a long road. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
Hang on. It'll be good. And you're going to impact people with it.
That's it.
That's it. Brian says, ding, ring the bell.
Yeah, I mean, mine has just been consistency. I'm definitely like the squirrel, like shiny thing. And I think, obviously Phillip is more of the, no, we're going to stay on the track. Like, we're not going to look at that right now. And I say that in love and honor and respect because, if this was just me, we wouldn't be at 100. I'll tell you that right now. And so it's been, I think, at times a little bit of labor of love
For sure.
But yeah, just the consistency and keep producing. And then I would just say to myself, invite more people on. I haven't done a great job. I've done a good job inviting people, but just like staying on them to actually get on the show.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I want to focus on in the next 100 is to get some of the people that I'm, kind of jiving with or digging on to actually become guests on the show. So
Right.
that's
It's a good
where
one.
I'm at.
It's a good one.
That's awesome. Hey, you've been listening to the Uncommon Life Project Podcast 100th episode.
Yes,
Hey,
thank you.
congratulations, fellas.
Thank you.
What a
Thank you
script.
for co-hosting.
You did
with
great,
us.
man.
This was
So good.
This was killer.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Well, I think you should exit your own show.
All right. Well, you've been listening to the Uncommon Life Project. I've been your host, Philip Ramsey,
And I am Brian Dewhurst.
with...
Ben Fust.
There it is. All right. Tune in next time. Thank you.
Go Be Uncommon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
That's all for this episode of the Uncommon Life Project, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.